Oh, hello everyone. It's Francis Seeley here. I'm from GlobalNet 21, and I'd like to welcome you today to this webinar. We started a few seconds early, so we'll wait for a few people to come on. We are doing now a series of webinars quite often on topics which interest people and which are, vitally important. And in this webinar, we're going to look at the whole question of prison and reform and rehabilitation. One of the problems we have in this country, which is a real problem, and that is we don't often realize that when people are in prison, the move from prison to community is a very, very strong and powerful thing. And people don't always get the support and the backup that they need. Agencies don't always cope very well with that. And so we're going to talk to Fiona Small today, who has actually developed a project, particularly for mothers, to help them move from prison to community to rehabilitate so they don't offend again more effectively. But can I say that this is one of many webinars that we do, and we're GlobalNet 21. And if you want to find out about our other ones, you can look at our meetup site. Our next webinar, in fact, is going to be on civil society democracy in the voluntary sector. And you can see on the right of the screen a button that you can click on and immediately sign up for that particular one if you want to take part in it. So please do that if you're interested in that one. But what we're going to do now is we're going to concentrate on this particular webinar, and I'm going to introduce Fiona, who's going to go through this with us and then answer your questions. So Fiona, over to you.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you, Francis, for that lovely introduction. My name is Fiona Small. I'm the founder of Young Mums Support Network, and today's webinar will be on mothers and the transition from prison to the community, and looking at exploring some of the ways that I've found would be quite unique and dynamic to support with that transition from prison to the community and reintegrating into society and back to their children. So we're going to start the presentation now. So I've just explained and introduced myself, who I am. So our slogan that Young Mums Support Network uses is breaking the cycle for a new generation, and that's ultimately what we need to see done. So that's our lovely logo. I really like that. When you go over to the next slide, you'll see one of our main programs. It's called Ladies Lunch. Ladies Lunch, basically we teach mums how to cook a fresh nutritional meal on a budget. It's targeted at low-income families. So we're looking at the food poverty crisis. We're looking at mothers who are struggling financially to feed their children. There's a high number of food banks. We're seeing 1 in 5 children going to bed hungry. I've done some recent research, and shops like Lidl and Aldi are having to call the police and get mothers arrested, and they're stealing stuff like meat. So we have a severe food poverty crisis here in the UK, and that's been kind of one of the reasons why I created Ladies Lunch, because I'm very concerned about that. You're going to see we recently did an initial assessment, which was a focus group at Drakehall Prison, which is in Staffordshire. We had 8 women attend our focus group. Now, we're currently liaising with them about delivering our Ladies Lunch programme inside of Drakehall. You move over to the next slide, you'll see the questions that we had asked the women. So 8 of the women that attended our focus group completed the questionnaire, and you will see, how highly they scored in some of the headings, as you can see, was information about local colleges and subsidised courses, building self-confidence and resilience, healthy lifestyles, finding a job, communication skills, planning finances and budgeting, networking skills, cooking on a budget, self-motivation. And if you look along the sides, you'll see the percentages. On the next slide, it if we go over to the next slide, you'll see in a bit more detail a breakdown of the analysis from that, and that was it was a really big eye-opener to me to see the level of just basic need for mothers. And I'm a mother of two. I mean, when you go over to the next slide, I'm not sure how many of us as mothers were taught stuff around becoming a confident mum or managing your finances, you know, building soft skills, managing your home. I mean, I always say to people that there is no manual with parenting, and when it comes to raising children and motherhood, it really does take a village to raise a child, and there needs to be a wraparound support. That's why I'm so passionate about a support network, an effective support network, because it's, you know, paramount in times in these times, especially with what you're seeing that we have. Even on the next slide, so the Ladies Lunch program, just to give you a small outline. So we bespoke this program tailored to obviously a prison environment. It's quite different in the community how we deliver it, but you know, week one, becoming a confident mum, what is a role model? So we explore conversations about that and get the women really thinking, because you'll find in those environments that not many people, depends on obviously what the earlier start was like, or you know, whether they were care leavers or how their early years begun, never really got the opportunity to kind of, you know, have that role model, so to speak. You know, building your confidence through goal settings. I think we all have goals and stuff that we need to do. You know, week 3 we cover stuff like building your confidence through removing anxiety. Week 4, developing healthy habits and lifestyles. Building positive relationships with your children and time management. Very important when in a prison setting, because you find that during the time whilst a mother will be incarcerated, their children will either be with another family member, or if a family member is not around, then they usually will be going into social care. So, you know, those are the bridges that we look to kind of explore in terms of building those relationships back with children. One lady in particular who spoke about her experience being in a domestic violent relationship, losing her children twice to social care, and having to prepare herself for November when she'll be released, about how she's going to have a fight on her hands to get those children back. So week 6, you can see positive relationships with your children, praise, rewards, and setting boundaries, which is not always an easy task. Building positive relationships with children, internet safety, very, very important, especially for those who may have been inside for quite a while and is not up to date with, you know, kind of the latest technology that the youngsters have access to, which is very, very concerning in these times. Managing your finances, cooking on a budget, and you know, we do stuff with a nice little closing gala and celebration certificate and so on, and give rewards for those that completed the course. So that's a brief outline of, you know, kind of what we would be delivering inside of Drake Hall in the community. So we've been given a space to hub the service, which has a community cafe, which is what we'll be launching. We're able to train mothers with barista training. We've also been able to give them access to developing their skills, creating creative menus, and looking at planting like fruit and veg, which I'm really excited about developing and establishing that project. When you go on to the next slide, you'll see this was our ladies' lunch leaflet. Many of you who know me on this webinar would have seen this a lot of places, and this is one of the, this was delivered in Lambeth. We ran this 3 times in Lambeth last year. It was a great success and was able to engage with mothers who have done some amazing stuff since the project. The next slide just shows you a bit of them in action. So, you know, this is just mums coming together. There's something powerful about when women come together and, you know, we cook, we eat, we share stories. And out of that, as much as Ladies Lunch is just a tool, it's a little vehicle that we've found works very well, especially with women, because there's a lot of issues at the moment, social issues around housing, whether it be money management, you know, some need you know, to support around domestic violence or conflict management, or whether it be absent fathers. So we've built this model to kind of look at how we can hub a service and work with the other agencies to bring about information to women that need it. But the focus at this moment in time is obviously the transition for mothers in prison, and looking at this as a model for someone who is being released from prison, who is quite, you know, dealing with the emotional issues of being inside, and how to kind of navigate your way through that, because there's a lot of stuff that comes with that. So, you know, coming out and then going straight to the homeless unit. So I've been doing a lot of research on kind of what would be a mother's journey who has literally just been released through the gate, and who picks them up from that point, and where do they go, you know. And speaking with other providers that do a lot of like through the gate work, one of the things that's been really reiterated is the importance of that initial engagement once you get them through the gate. So for example, the Clink restaurants, I had a conversation with the CEO. He shared a really interesting story with me, actually, because they have a very interesting model. So their model is basically they work with the prisoners 3 months before they're about to be released. This is the male prisoners, by the way. 3 months before they're about to be released. On release, they are met at the gate, and they are provided with accommodation. So then they're brought to their accommodation, but they also find them a job as well. So all of this pre-stuff has happened before release. And then they have an ongoing support 12 months after their release. Their reducing offending rate has been phenomenal, you know. And when you look at how they've really sealed the gaps or bridged the gaps to not allow for an individual to reoffend, it's, you know, highly not surprising why they would get the results that they've been getting. So he shared a story with me and said to me that, you know, a lady had gone into a women's prison during the summer, and during the summer period, when she had gone in, she only had on a flimsy top and a little skirt. And she was released in the December, which was winter. And that individual was released with her clothes were given to the same clothes that she went inside with, was given to her in a bag. Clothes were full of mold, right? And literally she was put out the gate, no coat or anything. And they at the Clink had picked her up and bought her a coat and found her accommodation. And you think to yourself, well, there's a massive focus at the moment around reducing women offending. And when you hear of stories like that, it really does concern you and think, well, why is it that, you know, women who are, I would say, more vulnerable would not have that same type of wraparound support for them? So that's been a really troubling me, if I'm to be totally honest with you. So I'm exploring ways of how we collectively as third sector organisations, those that are working with women through the transition, can look at introducing some form of, you know, early sign up where you're able to apply for your benefits, even if it's 2 weeks before release. I'm engaging with a young lady who was released last year, and she shared something with me that it took 22 days from release for her benefits to kick in. She never received a back date, and, you know, had it not been that she had a support network around her, like her mother, she would have, you know, had to result into something, because everybody needs to eat. So, you know, goodness knows what she would have had to have done. Now, you think about having someone to pick you up and position you in a place where you've got accommodation. So I had a conversation with one of the support workers at Women in Prison today, and she was saying a lot of their kind of advocates spend all day at the homeless units, you know, and that because of the shortage in housing and the temporary accommodation, especially in London, they have major issues around housing women. And then you look at the fact that, you know, they're not entitled to accommodation, so they say, and then they've got to try and get their children back, but they can't get their children back because there is no fixed accommodation. And usually if the children are either with a family member or so on and so forth, it makes more sense for the child to stay there until the mum has stabilised herself and got herself in a bit of a settled routine. So you'll see the stuff that we're doing with mums, because it's practical parenting, that I always call it that word, because stuff where you look at the next slide, and these are images of mothers that we've worked with. These are not women who have been in prison, mind you. These are just women in the community that we've engaged with and worked with, and they've really enjoyed the service. Not only does it bring that kind of bond with mother and child and that time away, because you know, life is busy. We're all preoccupied sometimes with either our phones or the internet or some form of distraction. So this is mother and child time, really healthy bonding time. You move over to the next slide. We're sharing skills. So we're all about well-being, looking at healthy lifestyles, looking at how we can prepare, because we know that when you look at a healthy lifestyle in terms of what you're feeding yourself and how you are, whether that be, you know, food and what your environment is, it will lift your well-being. So it's looking at it from a holistic perspective. You go over to the next slide, you'll see the group of us just there learning about, I think we were making smoothies there as well. We do a bit of pampering for mums, because one of the things the reason why we provide the service that we do with creche included as well, because it's very important. You change over to the next slide, you'll see that time away from your children, even if it's just respite, to just have a bit of a recharge. That's one of the colleges that we engaged with, and we did a bit of a pamper day for mums, and a lot of feedback came back from that and said, wow, you know, I never get an opportunity to do this. I'm always, you know, focused on being a mother and having to kind of go through that routine. So I'm not missing that. When you're looking at well-being, I look at, there's the new theme now called the 5 Ways to Wellbeing. It's very, very important to look at that. And then upskilling. So, you know, you look at the next slide, we engage with other services that are providing that support for mums. And when we're looking at well-being, we're looking at the mental well-being and the emotional well-being of mothers as well, and also what the needs are. So let's use a recent case, very, very recently. So we've got the Sarah Reid case, and I'm highly involved in the campaign for Sarah Reid. I'm also a member of Black Socks, and for those that don't know who Black Socks is, if you look at the Sarah Reid campaign and go onto Facebook, you'll be able to find it. This is a mother who was very, very troubled during her early years as a result of losing a child, and we won't go into that story, but you know, she was actually in January found dead in her cell in Holloway Prison, and it makes you think to yourself, well, somebody who's been known to the sector and has had severe mental health for over a number of years, why was that individual in prison? And one of the things that I really would like to look at exploring through the Ladies Lunch program and the other programs that we have is that, is prison suited for mothers in particular? You think about how much it would save the state to look at an alternative to custody, depending on the nature of the crime. So if you have a mother that, okay, for example, has stolen something from Aldi because she's needed to feed her children, right? So we need to look at what led this mother to go and do that. And then you think about, actually, what would that save the state? Bearing in mind, housing benefit only pays, so this is the other concerning part as well. So if you have if you're socially housed, whether it's a council property or a housing association, you only get, I think it's just over, is it 15 weeks? Don't quote me, but it's a certain amount of weeks whilst your housing benefit will be paid. And if you are in custody during that period of time, even if you're about to be released before that, you will lose your property, and that means that you will become homeless. So when you look at kind of a model like what we're trying to do to reduce homelessness, you know, reduce mental health, support mothers with their emotional needs, and able to provide them with soft skills, you'll be surprised at the basic skills that not every mother has, you know, and that is maybe just cooking or preparing a meal. And even just, you know, we were about to work with the mother and baby unit, and the stuff that we're doing with those and their teenage mothers is just around kind of supporting them with that transition from supported housing to independent living, because it's very, very vital that, you know, especially with the youngsters, we get them to understand that during the times that we're living in now, we've got welfare reform. Universal credit is a massive concern to me, massive. I'm always lobbying DWP and getting correct information on what's currently happening and when this is going to roll out, because I'm concerned about when universal credit is going to come in. And most people who are working in this sector understands that it's going to be one lump sum payment that's paid. So all your housing, but every one of your benefits is paid directly to the individual. Now we have, if we're dealing with young mothers, for example, whose priority is their mobile phone, their latest smartphone, that they have these ridiculous contracts, and you think, okay, are they going to prioritize paying their rent and the roof over their head, or is that phone going to take priority? You know, it doesn't take a genius to work out what would be that mother's priority. Not to mention, okay, so you transition from supported housing to private accommodation, because remember, we have a massive housing crisis at the moment. So they're saying they're not building any more social housing, and there isn't much social housing left. So we're left with issues where mothers are being placed in temporary accommodation or rented accommodation, right? They're being moved out of their areas of support. So you'll have a mother, say for example, who lives in Lambeth and, you know, got cousins and friends and so on and so forth, which is their wraparound support network in that area, and they're being moved to Birmingham. I'm supporting a lady at this moment in time who is in Birmingham. Her mental health is really at the verge. She's literally just having a breakdown. A gang in the Birmingham area is after her, is threatened to stab her son, who's 13. She's got 4 children, and she is really at the brink. And she's trying to come back to London in her local area, but has been told they do not have a duty to house her. I've had to be personally advocate on behalf of one of my young mums who, you know, moved out of borough because she moved into a new relationship. That relationship broke down. Her child was under 1. I had to go to Olive Morris Health and really, really advocate on her behalf. But thank goodness for the wraparound other networks that I have with regards to other agencies that gave me the correct information to go and advocate on this young lady's behalf. She's an 18-year-old mother, right? And they said she was there with her bags, had nowhere to go. So, you know, was able to find her a temporary accommodation. The temporary accommodation that they've been given, that's another reason for concern, because some of them is not suitable for an animal to live in, much less a child and a young child and a mother. So we, you know, when you look at kind of how we are going to look at reducing offending, how we're going to be supporting well-being, and you know, you've seen Mr. Cameron say he's going to invest £1 billion in mental health and supporting mothers. If these basic needs are not in place, and if these individuals are challenged not only financially, right, they don't have any set place to live, you know, emotionally they've got a lot of stress going on, and then when it comes to kind of like some of their skill sets, it's quite low. A combination of that is why we're looking, when we look at certain communities and you can identify what the barriers are, where do you begin the intervention, and what needs to really be in place when exploring this? So this is, you know, as you can tell, I'm very passionate about this. I really, really, really am passionate about this. I'm passionate about support network. I'm passionate about mothers. If, as somebody said the other day, that if you want to see the future, right, you need to look at the children. And when you look at the children, you have to look at who's raising them. And when we look at society today, right, and we look at the issues that we're having, we do need to look into this area very, very deeply. So, you know, I'm going to allow for, I think I've been ranting on for a little while now, and I can see a few questions and stuff coming over, but, you know, I really want to get to the crux of this. It's really, really important that we look at, you know, bridging these gaps. We look at kind of sharing of information in terms of best practice. I think third sector organisations need to come together. I had a phenomenal conversation with Women in Prison. They've got like 3 women's centres, Women's Matter, you know, they deal with like DV and a few things. So we do have, you know, services that are doing quite a lot in this area for women, and I do believe that we need to kind of look collectively as organisations around how we can kind of lobby the government, get some stuff in place, you know, get some manifestos so that we can get these voices heard.
Okay, thanks, Fiona. That's a pretty exhaustive presentation, and it does show the really interesting work you're doing. We've got some questions coming up, but just before we do that, let me repeat again that this is one of many webinars that we'll be doing in GlobalNet 21. And if you want to find out about all the webinars we're doing, then you can join up our meetup site. You can see it here. If you click on the join now, it will take you immediately to our GlobalNet 21 meetup site. You can see all the webinars we've done in the past. You can see all the ones we are going to do in the future, and you can sign up to the ones that you're interested in, and that will ensure that you're registered on that. So if you click join now, it would take you directly to that site. So I hope you will. Anyhow, thanks a lot for that presentation. And as you see, we're beginning to get some questions coming up already. Claudia has said she's wondering whether there are other prisons apart from Drake Hall where ladies' lunches are being delivered. Do you know whether there are, and what plans do you have, Fiona?
Sorry, repeat that. Sorry, I was reading a question. Sorry, Francis.
Oh, yeah, Claudia asked, what other prisons apart from Drake Hall is there a ladies' lunch being delivered? Do you know, or what other plans do you have?
Well, currently, ultimately, we'd like to introduce it to young offenders, even into SEND, to see how we can work with the younger lot. I don't know how many are familiar with the Clink model, but I would really look at how we could marry that model, because I really do like their practice in terms of what their evidence base is. So at the moment, it's still in negotiation stages on how we can kind of introduce it. So I don't have an answer yet, but stay tuned, hopefully soon.
But presumably you've got plans ahead to replicate what you're doing elsewhere, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially at HMP staff, for example. So if anybody who knows the Clink model will know that they're in various prisons, and the women's prisons that they're in is HMP Style, which is in Cheshire. And then they're in Brixton, HMP Highdown, and there's one in Bristol. And, you know, opportunity to come to, even if we have to start with Style, because I'm not sure if the Clink are building any more restaurants, because there was question about them kind of going into Drake Hall, but they're not going to do that.
Claire said she's been really interested in what you've said, and she's very interested in the issues because she's been working with user voice. Andrea makes it clear which user's voice that is, I think. But she's saying that, you know, and with the meetings they've had with probation, they're trying to find out what support women feel they need in preparation for release from prison. I mean, what's your relationship, Fiona, with probation? I mean, are they an essential part of this, or, you know, because of the cuts and the changes in probation, does it make it even more essential that organisations like yours exist, because probation can't do it alone?
Yeah, well, I don't think, in terms of probation, I'm not in a position to comment on that because I don't have dealings with them directly, but I do know, for example, the lady who I mentioned has been released last July, and in terms of kind of, because she's low risk, she doesn't, in terms of her interaction with her probation officers, her probation officer, and how often she has to sign on, which is once every 2 weeks. To my understanding, it's kind of like, I don't want to say a pointless exercise, but I think with probation, I'm not sure if they are a little bit like social workers in terms of what their caseload is like. I mean, as you know, social workers have become administrators. I know a social worker had to stop practicing just because of that very fact, that she felt that she wasn't able to give the duty of care that is needed. You know, you've got 15 cases that are very serious and severe, and she's an adult social worker. How much time can you give those individuals? So I think when you look at the cuts, then obviously there is a transformation of probation services, and obviously with the CRCs and stuff, like I said, I'm not in a position to comment on that specifically, but I do believe with the privatisation of how things are going with probation services, it's an interesting time to see what's going to happen next and how these things are going to play out. So I suppose it's a bit like watch this space, but I personally don't have an answer to how probation works.
Okay, can I just say to everyone, if you've got questions or points, please raise them, because Fiona's here to answer them, and she'd be very interested in your questions. Fiona, how did you actually get involved in this yourself? What was your motivation behind it? How did it all start?
It started for me because I'm a mother of two, so for me, I've got a 4-year-old and I've also got an 11-year-old. And I had, you know, when you do the math, my 4-year-old will be 5 in the summer, and I had him in 2011. And I witnessed in my area, I witnessed the London riots quite frontline, and the impact of that really troubled me as a mother. And I mostly tell people that it was my call to action, or my response to the London riots, just because of what I saw in my area, the level of devastation, the burning buildings. As a mother who was, and I always say I was a nursing mother at the time, so it could have been my hormones, but I really felt that me as an individual needed to do something, and I felt it was my responsibility. So I created this was birthed out of a response. So creating a thought network. If anybody was going to say to me that, you know, how if you develop the programs stuff, I sit on a few boards. I'm on some steering groups, an advisory committee. I'm also a South London neighbourhood committee member for one of the large housing associations as well, and I've done some interesting work with them. And I thought, you know what, I can navigate my way through this sector by looking at what the needs are and creating. I'm a creative, so I believe in a lot of why I've been managed to engage with what people label as a hard to reach group. Is because of understanding how to meet people where they're at and what their needs are, but not coming from a judgmental perspective. Everybody needs support, you know, and there's a label and a stigma attached to being a single mother, or, you know, they paint this picture of what a single mother looks like. And I'm big on challenging those perceptions, because I'm a single mother. I'm not a single mother by choice, but I'm a single mother by circumstances. So, you know, I know the challenges that faces, what comes with that, and obviously what needs to be in place when raising children, and how easy. I think we're all Sarah. I posted on my Facebook a TED talk from Sarah Hyde. I challenge people to watch it. Powerful. It's on the PCAN website if you'd like to know. And, you know, having discussions with other services that are working for the same cause, you know, engaging with them, finding out how, you know, we can work together, offer what we do in terms of the support, and it lifts the load in terms of what other agencies are looking for, because some of them don't have the capacity to deal with that. Even the mother and baby unit that we're about to go into, there's nothing for TPS, Teenage Pregnancy Service, absolutely nothing. And these are just mothers that are just left to their own devices, and it's clearly evident that they need support.
Yeah, I gather, yes, you're a single mum. I gather you've got your 11-year-old shut in the other room, hoping she won't come out and jump on you in the middle of the webinar. Anyhow, it'd be fun if she does, but wait and see. That's one of the great things about doing things from home. I mean, so you got involved in this because of the experiences you went through. And then you made contact with prisons. Now, this in a way relates to Madeline's question. You know, you wanted to do something. How did you get in? How can other people make contact? What process do they have to go through in order to go into prisons? I mean, supposing Madeline wanted to do something like you, what would she have to go through to get that access?
I tell you what you have to be a key networker. So I was invited to the Barrow Cadbury's Trust roundtable focus group that they recently had around reducing women offending, especially young women offenders, and it was really good. It was most people in this sector will know who the Barrow Cadbury Trust are. And I was able to have a conversation with the Deputy Governor of the prison, who I spoke to about Our Lady's Lunch programme. She was really interested. We had a really great conversation, and she was like, you know, I need to get you down to Staffordshire, because a lot of what's happening on the ground is very London based. So sometimes those prisons outside are quite forgotten. So, you know, a lot of even Women in Prison, for example, the organisation Women in Prison, they're, because of the closure of Holloway, they're looking at, you know, kind of what they're going to be doing with that land, and it needs to be either a women's centre or a centre for women that people can kind of get some support because of what was there for. So I would say, you know, if you, and I'm really persistent, I'm very determined. We've been having honest year. This isn't something that happens overnight, but I think what you have to do is, you know, get access to who it is that you need to speak to. Usually, I suppose the governor's a point of call, but I think with the changes within what's going on in London, there is quite a few challenges. Like I mentioned before, the contact that I have with the Clink, which is the CEO, who his name's Chris Moore, phenomenal guy, and he's been very supportive with what we're doing. I have access to a wider network. I'm part of a consortium, which is Choiceless Consortium, and I'm also trained as a LMP, which is a leadership mentoring program, through some of my advisors. I've got a large network behind me. You see Fiona's Small Young Mum Support Network, but behind me is an array of powerhouses that, you know, we're kind of giants in the field, and we know how to kind of lobby and get what we need.
Okay, so the lesson is don't mess with Fiona. Right, Mildred was asking you what was the model you referred to, and you mentioned it again. It was the Clink model, wasn't it?
Yes, Clink's restaurant. And for those who are London based, there's a few that you can go and you can book to go into the restaurant. I challenge people. I mean, I had my board, we had our Christmas dinner at the Brixton, example, in December, and the perception that you have, because when I kind of didn't tell my board where we were going for dinner, but I just told them that you needed to bring your passport. So I think a lot of them was thinking, oh, she's flying us to Paris for lunch. So when obviously they had to bring the ID, and then I had to let them know we're actually going to prison. So I remember, you know, people going and thinking, oh, you know, because you have to kind of go through, it's the same process as if you were going to visit somebody in prison. But once you go through that restaurant, and I've only been to the Brixton one, and the experience that I've had, it's really, really amazing. So you can so there's one in HMP Highdown, there's one in Brixton, these are London, and there's one in Cheshire, which is in Style, HMP Style. So, you know, check them out. I would say check them out. I mean, they've got a brilliant model. It's very, you know, 5-star in there, and you would not believe that you are inside of a prison, the level of service. And I've been, you know, because of the relationship that I've got with the CEO, he actually gave us a tour. And for those who are looking to book meeting rooms and stuff, you can book meeting rooms there, because they've got conference rooms and stuff inside there. So it's a massive eye-opener in terms of what they're doing. But even when you see the impact and the results that they're having, it's a wonder why they're doing it, because they have sealed every gap. They meet them at the gate, they've found them accommodation, they've found them employment, and then they've got that 12 months ongoing support that if it needs to extend, it also extends beyond 12 months as well. So they know what they're doing.
Okay.
And Chris didn't pay me for that.
No. Anyhow, Andrea is on as well. Andrea is someone who did a meeting with us in the House of Commons recently on drug reform, and she's done a lot of work on that and is involved in a trust for raising money around that issue. And we're doing a webinar very soon on drug reform that Andrea's going to be involved in. And she was asking, are any young mums drug dependent in the groups that you're aware of? Because she says that members recovering from, or addicts recovering, have been told that they have to be 5 years off drugs before they can do anything like you're suggesting, Fiona. Do you have any experience of that?
I don't actually have an experience. And hi, Andrea. We actually have a contact, funny enough, a lady named Annette, who's one of my special advisors. She said she's known you for a very long time, actually. I've meant to actually message you back. Please forgive me for not getting back to you, but hello. What it is, with regards to that, I don't actually work with those cases in terms of those women, because I'll tell you how Young Mum Support Networks referrals mainly come from, especially women in the community who are not necessarily coming from the justice system. We work very closely with NHS family nurse partnerships, and those that know who family nurse partnerships are, they work with all of the 19s and unders, teenage mothers in the country. They work with them for 2 years, so from when the mother gets pregnant until the baby is 2 years of old, and we work with them usually when the mother's when the babies become around, say 6-7 months, and want to kind of engage them into like children's services. So for example, the new borough we're about to go into, they've just had 19 babies born, and on their caseload they've got 53. So we're going to be, we've now got a new centre and a new space, that's where we're going to be engaging with them. And we found when we get these, especially the young mothers in particular, who don't always necessarily access children's services, and when you look behind what's going on, usually care leavers, there are lots of kind of challenges and barriers to why they don't access. But once we engage them, especially because they've got the relationship with their family nurses, and then they kind of are, you know, introduced to our service, and we're a consistent once a week program, which is 10 weeks for them, it works. It's a very good relationship. So your answer to that question is no, because we don't deal with that level of need at this moment in time.
Okay, David's made a comment which I think is very supportive of you, and Andreas, I think, telling me off a bit because I think I got it wrong in saying what they raise money for, but I'm used to being told off. And Pauline mentioned a woman, you said you mentioned a woman in transition in Birmingham, and she says she works for an organisation called Waits, Women Acting in Today's Society, and they offer floating support to women on release from prison, and she's open to receive referral, and she's put her email down. So if anybody wants to get in contact, or if you want to get in contact with her, Fiona, clearly she'd be delighted with that. And
I know Pauline's a friend of mine, a sister of mine. So yes, hi. We definitely will be introducing them. There will be, because we're looking, the ladies' lunch model, we are looking at scaling this model, and the next place that we're looking at it from a national perspective will be Birmingham, and then also in Manchester, and then Bristol, because those are the three main places that have been kind of expressing an interest, and we've got capacity to deliver. But we're just, you know, obviously just finding our feet in London first, and looking at how we can then introduce and scale up. And also, you know, with to mention what Pauline has as well, she's got the Olive Hub as well. I'll be going to her launch. They do some phenomenal work as well. And she's also a counsellor as well. So Pauline, I'm just plugging what you do. You may want to put some information about your counselling service that you offer as well.
I mean, David actually raises a very good point, and that he says, you know, the institutionalization of women in prison is wrong. But the problem is society is outside is dysfunctional. And if you send them out into the community, often they're going into a dysfunctional society. I mean, how do you, I mean, obviously that is the case for support networks like yours, but do you sometimes feel you're like Canute holding back the tide, that there's this terrible dysfunctional society, and these women have to fight against all the odds to survive?
Definitely, it's just, you know, this is why we have to look at breaking the cycle, because I mean, if you're dealing with, you know, a chaotic lifestyle and dysfunctionality, and then you've got to try and think of a routine. So you're a mother, so you've got the school run, and then you've got to kind of get uniform in order, and then you might have school trips to prepare for, and then you may have parents evening, and then you've got, I mean, how do you function? You know, where does the kind of intervention and support comes in place to kind of really say, actually, you know, this is how we can help you. These are the tools, and this is why, you know, providing mothers with, you know, the basic tools around teaching them how to cook, how to prepare, it's stuff that not only will they pass on with their children. I mean, during the last summer's holiday program that we ran, it was lovely to see children cooking stuff that they weren't doing before, they wouldn't do at home, and it's making that difference between the bonding of the mothers and being able to plug into other women, other mothers who have the same challenges. And sometimes this is what women want to hear, especially as mums. You want to just know that you're doing a good job, or you're not alone. It can be isolating, especially if you feel that, I don't want to say I'm struggling, because I don't want social care to come in and intervene, because you might need help, where to go to ask for help. Do you understand? So there's a massive thin line. And then also when you look at some of the interventions that are in place, that I've worked with, like the early intervention team, the social services in one of the London boroughs, and you know, it's there, but what needs to kind of be apparent to some, especially mothers and families as well, is that social care, especially the early intervention team, they're not there to remove children. They're there. The title is the detail is in the title. It's an early intervention team, and they are trying to in place, but sometimes it's the extreme of the needs or the support. And I suppose when it comes to social services, and obviously, you know, social workers being challenged with, you know, their caseloads, where do they begin? Where do they begin the support? If mum needs it, child needs it, the younger one needs it, somebody's got special education needs, or the older one is at the verge of being involved in a gang, there is no father around, or if the father is around, you know, he probably doesn't know what place to play. And this is why, in terms of, as much as I emphasize on mums, don't get me wrong, I am not ruling out the fathers. Fathers are so important in this, and we as mothers can't do it alone. I have a phenomenal organisation run by a gentleman named Courtney Brown. He set up an organisation called Father to Father, and we're in the process of looking at doing some really creative stuff and bringing families together and looking at bringing the fathers back home, because sometimes the men, it's not actually their fault while they have been pushed away. Because, you know, I've worked with mothers who have sadly been given the kind of green light to push the fathers away. They will get these injunctions out on them, and any little wrong move these men do, sadly, they will be arrested, and then it turns into a whole different kettle of fish. So, I mean, I often say, if fathers are, you know, responsible, and they're men that know that they need to play that role, they have a space. They need to be, you know, involved in their children's lives, especially their sons and also their daughters. But we can see that we need men in this. It's not just the women. The women are burning out. You know, they are burning out because it's a lot to manage on your own. You know, so I'm looking at those issues, especially within the BME community, and you know how we can look at, I always say, sorting out and cleaning up our mess. You know, we had these children. They're not the responsibility of the state. You know, they are the responsibility of us. They come from out of our household. So I think together, collectively, we can collaborate and cooperate with the fathers. We can co-parent. You know, I'm trying to develop a co-parenting strategy, and I so believe in it, because there are ways that we need to look at conflict management, we need to look at mediation, we need to look at you know, therapy and counselling. Not every setting. So I used to be a contact supervisor, and you know, as much as I understand that contact centres do have a place, it's not a natural environment for a child. And I do think if we look at some form of strategies in developing a bit more normality, just to reduce the you know, the trauma that the children face. Look at it from a child-centered approach. We've got a report I read on the Barnardo's website, 200,000 children who have either a parent, mother or father in prison, and those children are 65% more likely to be offenders. They're the ones that are living in the highest level of poverty. They are in the most deprived areas, and they're vulnerable. You know, so together we need to look at strategies to really bridge those gaps and support and save those children. Wise, we're going to constantly see headline news about, you know, different social issues around the youngsters and children, because we need to really look at saving these children. And that's where I really feel that the service that we're providing with other providers, not just myself, I can't do it alone. I'm one organisation who is building and developing and has grown quite quickly, but I'm passionate about this, and I think that collectively we can make some really dynamic changes.
Eco Everyday, that's an interesting name, has sort of said, well done for what you're doing. And, you know, it's great work. Pauline's put another link up to share with us, which is great. Andrea says, you know, David's point about a dysfunctional society, poverty, racism, etc., is a really important one. The problem, Fiona, sometimes is that some people, not Andrea, because she does so much in so many areas, but some people will use that as an excuse not to do the sort of work you're doing. They're saying, we've got to change society, we've got to, you know, get utopia before we do anything. But you've actually got stuck in there, haven't you? You've said, right, despite all these problems out there, we still have to do something. There's an important message there, isn't there?
Yeah, we have to. And not just because it's... volume's gone. Hi. I think the volume's gone. Not just because it's not on our doorstep. I mean, when I think about when I set this up, I had a newborn, you know, He was a little, he couldn't have gone out and rioted or looted or done anything because he was probably about 4 weeks old, but he's still gonna grow. Do you understand? And I at the time my daughter was 7, she's still going to grow. And not just, and from a mother's perspective, you know, I would never like to be able to, I can empathize with a mother who can say, oh, they've lost a child, because I know that it's every mother's kind of worst fear, even from that time of pregnancy to when you go into the delivery room and you deliver that child. Every mother wants to kind of, you know, and when you think about the level of loss, especially with, you know, kind of mothers losing their children, not just boys anymore, girls as well, it's heartbreaking. And no mother and no father, not just mother, no parent, right, should be burying their children for loss of somebody kind of taking their life. And I do feel that, you know, as a community, we need to look at it that they are our children. And I believe in the village model. I love this kind of, if we can get back to the accountability when, you know, so and so knew so and so, and you could pick up the phone and say, I've just seen your child and they are here and I've sent them home, let me know when they're home. Or you've got senior citizens where you can sit down and share stories. There's a lot of knowledge in senior citizens. They have an amazing, you know, I want to bring an intergenerational model into this, because they have resilience. They know what it's like to raise, you know, 6, 7 children with limited resource. I think sometimes I do think we are quite spoilt, because I think we've got quite a lot of access to stuff, and, you know, we need to kind of look at ways collectively of how this becomes our responsibility, not just because my children are young, not because the yellow billboard that I passed or the what I saw on London Tonight wasn't my child, but it was in my area. Oh, it wasn't in London, it was in Manchester. Oh, it's not in Manchester, it was Birmingham. It affects us all. It affects us all.
Okay. I think David's agreeing with you when you said the village model, where you go back to more loving, caring relationships, and he's saying that's what we need. And I guess, Fiona, that's what you're saying as well, that we need. Andrea thinks that you're developing a model that she can really identify with. It's real prevention work, and it's about those loving relationships. Where do you hope to go from here, Fiona? I mean, what's your vision? How do you want to see it develop? Because the trouble with voluntary groups is when you've got a good one, people are lucky. In some areas, there aren't those voluntary groups. They're not that good. It's a bit patchy. What's your vision in trying to get this sort of spread so that everyone benefits?
For me, my vision long term would really be looking at a sustainable model, and looking at a model that not only, because when we look at, you know, kind of what's happening, it's not just a UK issue, it's a global issue. This is economics, you know, when we look at the bigger picture. And sometimes I feel like I'm firefighting. Do you understand what I mean? Because if we're to be totally honest, especially third sector organisations, we know what needs to be in place. I mean, bless Mr. Duncan Smith, who decided to come from a moral standpoint and step down when he saw disabled people, you know, under attack. And I get that, and well done to him. But we know this is a political agenda. But for me, if I'm to take the direction that I would like to go in, I do think I need to take the political journey. But I also am passionate about us looking at resourcing mums academy. So I believe down the line, my vision is to look at developing a mums academy where we have a hub service all under one roof, because there is no manual. And that's my new kind of slogan, where we're able to provide mothers with soft skills, we're able to have a wraparound support that people need. Whatever the intervention needs to be in place needs to be in place. I'm looking at a model in America. It's called the Robin Hood Foundation, which seem to have some phenomenal resources and outcomes of what they're doing effectively in the communities. I do feel that I'm passionate about my own community, which is the Black community, and how I can support and bring about change. I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm a social entrepreneur, but I'm a creative as well. So I'm looking at developing products and programs that, one, will allow for us to become sustainable and give us shelf life, but also material and tools for people to be able to take, use and apply, and be able to create their own, you know, initiatives and build from there. Because who is going to save this economy is small businesses, it's going to be small communities, and I believe in community economies. You know, I think when you look at this ABC model that most people are talking about now, which is the asset-based community, ABCD, asset-based community development, we have resources. We can time bank, we can look at how we can share skills, trade. There's a way that we can look at building back a model that will really be effective. I think we need to stop looking out, but looking in. And if I was to build something, it would be to look at a matrix of a ABC model, asset-based community development, and look at how we can scale this model, evidence best practice, evaluate it really tightly, and then start to influence policy. You know, so that's the direction that I ultimately want to go. I want to see, you know, resources. I want to see Ladies Lunch being scaled across the country and having little hubs, you know, in different locations where we're able to train, we're able to feed. Children should not be going hungry. You know, we're in the UK. We are the 7th most wealthiest country in the world. We should not be operating like a third world country. Food banks in the UK is not the norm in 2016. Do you understand? So for me, that's my concern.
Okay.
I get passionate.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah, and so you should be. That's what motivates you, and that's really, really important. By the way, a few weeks ago we did a whole webinar on asset-based community development, ABCD, with Cormac Russell, who's one of the leading authorities in this country on that. And I'll send you a recording of that, Fiona, because it was a really, really good webinar. Yeah. We're getting close to the end now. Let's just deal with that point that Madeline raised, that you talk about a cooperative model of actually time banks and sharing economy and asset-based community development. And Madeline says, well, you know, it sounds a bit like the big society. Where in all this, what's the role of the state? Where does the state kick in? What's the new relationship between community and state in the model that you see, Fiona? And we've only got a little time to answer that, but you know, if you could tell us.
You little time. Where is that's a golden question, actually. If I'm to be totally honest, I really don't know. I think it's about, we're going to have to really educate communities. We're going to have to get people to the thing is when you're looking at economics, you have to get people. The people have the power, but the people don't realize they have the power, you know, and people don't realize that is because they don't have the understanding. And until we start to educate people about the importance of voting and getting your vote to count, the importance of having your voice heard, not just making noise or complaining and doing nothing about it. So my answer to that is, until we start to empower the people, you know, we're always going to have this divide because there's a big gap.
Okay. You know, we're getting some really complimentary comments. Pauline saying she's proud of you. You're a fantastic role model, and thank you for your passionate heart. And clearly, you are very, very passionate on this. People can get in touch with you if they want, and if they want to help, or if they want to do anything with you, can't they, Fiona?
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. I mean, it'd be good to. We're having a bit of a restructure in terms of team at the moment because things are growing quite quickly. So I'm managing my inbox, and I am having a bit of a transition with a new administrator and PA that's coming on board to support myself. But you can get me on Twitter. I do have an email, and if you know there is an out of office that comes on, that's absolutely fine. But you can find I am quite visible online as well. And thank you all for the feedback. I'm really I'm humble for the feedback that I'm receiving because. This is like I said, I am passionate about this, and from a mother's perspective, I really do feel concerned about what's going to happen to the next generation, and I think we need to really look at investing in the next generation and our communities. So thank you all very, very much. My email, I do believe, is on the bottom of the screen, but it's fiona@ymsn.co.uk. Twitter is @Fiona_Young_Mothers. And even if you just Google Fiona Small or Young Mum Support Network, you'll see the stuff that comes on about them. But thank you for your feedback. It's really humbling, and Francis and I are planning to do a few more stuff together, so stay tuned. And thank you for registering. I'm really humbled at the level of response to this webinar, because it's an area that not many people know about unless you're working in the sector.
Okay, but this webinar will go out to all the people who registered and aren't on here, because lots of people just register just to get the recording. So we'll go out to them. We'll go out to a wider network, and we'll automate this webinar so other people in other countries can see it again. Anyhow, I'll put your details up just before we go, but just remember, and this is my little plug at the end, if you are interested in our future webinars, and you want to find out what they are, then join up to our Meetup site. You can click here to join. You can see it on the right. Join up, and you can see all the events we're having. So really, thank you all for taking part. And Fiona, thank you very much for your presentation, for all the work you're doing, and for your enthusiasm. Anyhow, I'm going to leave you with your contact details and then close the webinar down. So thank you everyone for taking part, and thank you, Fiona.
Thank you, Francis. Thank you, everyone.